Okay, so this is topic six, dealing with the aspects of physical security. So, definitionally, just starting off here, basically, what when we talk about physical security, what we mean is we want to provision a safe environment for information processing activities focused on preventing unauthorized physical access to computing equipment. All right, that's one definition of it. Um, it involves securing organizational resources, making sure it's protected from theft, vandalism, intruders, physical destruction, and environmental factors. Right. And it's also involves the implementation of different countermeasures to address all these physical access threats and vulnerabilities. Physical access is it's interesting in that it you look at technology, security these days. So you look at things like encryption. You look at intrusion detection systems and firewalls and next generation firewalls. But you know ultimately a lot of this stuff goes back to physical security is a foundational, fundamental building block. You can have the most sophisticated intrusion detection systems in the world running in your operation. But if you do not have physical security, those all can be subject to compromise. All right, so it used to be physical security was information technology security. If you physically were able to secure your operation, you went pretty far to controlling it. Modern systems, not quite so much, but physical security is still a pretty important part of our IS security strategy. Bunch of different types of threats. So obviously environmental threats, something from the outside. Um, Man-made threats, so they can be, and they can take two forms. They can actually be intentional. Somebody actually overtly attacking, or and can be unintentional. It could just simply be mistakes, or accidents. All right, and each one have the same you um, implications. So it's really so it's a matter of whether it's intentional or unintentional. A man-made threat is a man-made threat. Um, Supply systems. So the idea of a in a data center, basically you're concerned about things like power, um, potentially interruptions to utilities, water, gas, communications, telecommunication networks. So a lot of these things are all external, supply systems of things that make you need to make this stuff work, right? And then finally, we have things like political threats, so things like riots and bombings and terrorist attacks are all different things that can also come into play, which fall into this category of physical security threats. So the first order of business as you're looking for physical security is really what are your facility requirements? What do you really want to have in place? So first thing is to look at what are all the potential entry points, so windows and fire escapes and doors, and you know obviously you don't want to necessarily have put your computers in a in a room with 7-foot picture windows, because obviously it's probably a little bit less secure than having a a reinforced door or steel reinforced um, windows. So you want to look at what are your different entry points. You want to know what you have in terms of like the walls. What are the walls made out of? What are the construction um, techniques? And there's actually a lot of situations. There's actually regulations or code recommendations around what things should be. Like double um, double drywall. Basically what do you have in terms of fire detection, fire protection, fire um, suppression equipment. And then you also have intrusions, or excuse me, infrastructure support systems, so heating and HVAC, air conditioning, emergency cutoff valves, power. Data centers, computers, you know, will throw out a lot of heat. It's basically one of the things that's noteworthy. Data centers have always historically had, big emphasis has been on the environmental controls and efficiencies, environmental controls. Because even though things systems have gotten um, more complicated, more sophisticated, there's still an issue with dealing with heat and dealing with the environmental environment that you're running your data set, you're running your systems in. So things you need to be aware of: electrical power supplies, alternative power supplies, disruptions, um, water and gas lines, and things you want to make sure you know evaluate proper placement, shut off valves. Uh, Organization structurally, compartmentalization of where things should be at. Obviously, some things will require more a higher degree of security and access control than others. So obviously, where your data center, where you actually your computers, your physical computers, and your storage is at, obviously that those areas have to be protected and access access carefully managed. And then different types of perimeter security implements. So obviously you've got fences and gates, bollards, which are basically or seemingly ornamental structures that are really really physical barriers. Protective landscaping and surveillance devices. So all these are different types of things that we see deployed around perimeters. A couple things, just some examples. Landscaping, um, fences, gates, different types of gates, and bollards, as we talked about. Short vertical posts used as barriers to prevent vehicles from accidentally or intentionally ramming into a facility. A lot of different types of locks. So you know, locks have been around a long time, so there's a lot of techniques that have been established. A lot of techniques have been involved of being able to pick locks and kind of be able to do things to be able to raking and picking, but also the technology of locks have changed. So we've things got like electronic, a digital keypad, um, your or your classic deadbolt lock, obviously, which can be may vary, depending upon how you struck the specifications on the deadbolt can be made very secure. Keyless locks, smart locks, those are all different ways, basically being able to use a non. All locks are not necessarily does not require like a physical key. Um, Power. So issues you run into with power, a whole bunch of different things, but basically you have issues if power runs low, and you have issues if power runs high. Obviously, you want a constant, steady state of electric power into your systems, because otherwise, you can potentially do damage to the systems themselves. So brownouts where you're actually getting a reduced voltage or sags and dips, where you get, basically you'll get dropouts on power for, for any periods of durations, maybe a second, maybe a few seconds. The inverse of that, surges and spikes. So the difference between a surge is difference between a surge and a spike is a surge is more of a longer term event. A spike is a short duration upsurge. And then static electricity. Computer systems are very boards are very sensitive. So if you have if you are statically charged and you touch a circuit board and then you generate a spark, you can actually do fair amount of damage to something with that. So you always have to be cognizant of static electricity. Ways you deal with this: you have an EPS, what we call UPS, or uninterrupted power supply. Basically, it will take power in and then adjust the flow to even out the flow. So if things go up or down, you've got a steady flow into your systems. Surge suppressors protects against spikes and surges. Um, Also, power line conditioning. You know, the way power line conditioning would be is basically you have a bank of batteries which are being charged with the with the raw electricity coming in, and then a inverter is used to maintain the a continuous power supply into the back end system. So you can have things go. Power can fluctuate up and down, but into the batteries. But the power conditioning, the power that actually drives the systems comes off in a steady flow. And then backup power systems. So you have a couple different options around that. Usually you'll see like a generator, diesel generator, things of that nature, or a redundant line from another power source. So a couple things. I mean, obviously there's the rules of dealing with electricity. So you don't want to put your fluorescent lights next to your power lines. You want to monitor it. You want to make sure you've got monitor it and then also regulate it and protect against surges. You want to make sure you've got control of your distribution panels, blazers, things that when people throwing switches and playing around with the surge with circuit breakers, which could disrupt operations. Um, Shielded cabling is used against magnetic induction. A lot of times, if you just simply run, unshielded wire could potentially generate, have some unexpected results. So making sure you've got the appropriate level of shielding, and both for within the data center and also for long cable runs. Fire protection. Obviously, the perils of fire, um, in a data center are pretty obvious. So things can do to control it. So obviously use fireproofing, use fireproof material, fire prevention, backup drills, and then basically storing all your backup medium fire protection. Um, Fire detection, so things like smoke detectors and heat detectors and things like that can be used to um, control fire or be able to detect fire and send alerts out if things were behind the scenes. Um, Fire suppression. Now, one of the challenges you run into with fire suppression in data centers is that you're dealing with electricity. So the idea of what you can use to actually in an environment where you've got high voltage running, so you really have to be careful with that. Usually, what you'll see in most data centers, you'll see something using like a halon or halon substitute or carbon dioxide or some sort of dry powder or something like that. There's different type A, B, C, D fires. So you know, you know fires in data centers are not class A or not type A fires. Right? It should at least be a B, a C, or a D, depending upon the circumstances. And the environments, it cost, the expense of these fire suppression systems can be fairly substantial. Right? So it's not. But by the same token, you don't necessarily want to put a fire out, and then as a byproduct of putting the fire out, actually destroy your data center or destroy your computers and systems. IDS, intrusion detection systems. Basically, one way of protecting an area is to make sure you put some sort of monitor. If somebody goes into that area, it can be detected and alerts sent out. A lot of different ways to do it. They've been around a while. So microwave, beams of light, vibrations, motion detectors, or motion ultrasonic fields. There's a number of different ways, and usually they're pretty effective. So just as some examples of IDS, vibration IDSs, acoustical IDSs, motion IDSs. So compartmentalized access, basically a data center really needs to be split up in such a way so that the things that are to be protected, basically the systems, are in a area that is controlled and monitored and protected. All right, so so you don't put your computers in a high traffic area. They're you limit access, you control that access and monitor and register everything that goes on. A couple of them ways you see this. You see, obviously electronic controls, physical controls. um, different techniques. Obviously procedures, so policies and procedures around that, particularly after hours. So the thing you always want to be aware of people being in an operation like after hours, potentially, what exactly what are they doing? What do they have access to? And surveillance mechanisms. I think it's pretty commonplace now of like video recording, like continuous video recording, that you can go back and review, after the fact, kind of see what might have happened or getting some insights of what might have gone down. Just some examples of things. Where you put your data center. You should put it in the center of the building, not at the edge of the building. You shouldn't put it in the basement. Shouldn't put it on the roof. You make sure it's high enough up so it protects against flooding. And don't put it under your water pipes. So there's a whole bunch of, some of the stuff seems to be common sense, but it's always interesting. So you'll hear stories about, you know, organizations getting their systems knocked offline, and because somebody didn't realize they had water pipes running through the top of their data center. Protection, a lot of this stuff is, once again, kind of a procedural, protecting it, maintaining an inventory, securing it, basically um, putting serial numbers, tracking serial numbers, securing workstations with locks, special keys, encryption, are actually using securing data on systems themselves using encryption is a best practice. Portable devices, so a couple of things we've seen with portable devices, putting tracking software on devices to be able to call home. You see that with phones. Actually, phones are kind of have their own built-in tracking devices. Um, Other things you can do for portable devices is actually put like an audible alarm system on, so if something passes through a checkpoint and has the alarm on it, it'll detect it, sort of like a shoplifting. And also the whole idea of also making sure you're physically controlling portable accesses. So a couple of the things we see here around how you secure things around safes, using the right type of safe. So obviously, if you have a lightweight safe, you want to make sure it's secured somewhere because somebody could walk. If it's light enough, you could put it in the back of the car and drive off with it. So you want to, you determine, what do you need? Are you looking for a theft resistance, or are you looking for fire resistance as well? So each one of these, and the idea is, you deploy the right tools for the right circumstances. So if you have a scenario where you're dealing with potential, on-site fire, um, then obviously you want to make sure you put the appropriate type of safe in place. And door locks, different types of door locks. Obviously, you know, one of the challenges with locks is to be, is using the right lock for the job. So there's certain things around, um, do you want to have a key type lock? Because if you have a key type of lock, then you have to make sure you're managing the keys. Um, do you have like cipher locks? Do you have pin entry? Do you have, different? So there's a number of different, things to be taken into consideration when picking particular locks you want to put in place. And then, things, key control, as I said, if you have a lock, understanding what the keys are, who has the keys, where are they at, where are they document who has them, establish the policies around those, making sure that you have, you deploy locks that are basically are set up in such a fashion so you can't go to Home Depot and have somebody generate duplicate keys for it. All right. So you're generating unauthorized duplicate keys. So a number of things that come into play around these decision making. Right? And that is it for physical security.